And it's time for us to move to the next session. This is going to be an interview on the topic, the AI-led media buyer, what changes next? Please join me in welcoming Mr. Ankit Desai, Head Media and Digital Marketing. Marico, round of applause for Mr. Desai. And joining him will be Mr. Sreekant Khandekar, co-founder and CEO, afaqs. Round of applause. Thank you so much.
Hi, good morning. You obviously all know Marico, but I wonder if you know how much it has changed over the last 10 years. So, when I first started covering it, that I was the editor of a magazine called A&M in the 90s. Marico was good and identified with Parachute. And then Saffola came along. So basically, that was what Marico was known for branding coconut oil, which was sold loose, and then in tins, and finally it was in these plastic bottles, the well-identifiable blue one which is still there. But in the last 10 years, Marico has done a lot of things. And from there, it has moved today. It's better known among the younger lot as perhaps a beauty and wellness company. They launched this something called Kaya Clinics. That's where they began. Then they have, excuse me, please could you put off the phones? Thank you. And they have acquired several D2C brands. And from a time when it was Marico, like many FMCG companies, was very proud, and they ought to be, and it's still very important, of having distributors, being available, say, maybe in 1 million outlets or so. Then it moved to the importance of modern retail and then online. And Ankit has seen much of this transformation over the last 10 years as the head of media and digital marketing. More than 10 years, I think, right? More like a dozen or so, yeah, that's right. So he has seen the market change, he has seen the company change, and he's seen the media change. Okay, so I think he's really in a good spot as far as we are concerned here. So I'm going to get started now, right? So first, coming to the subject of this discussion, which is when we say AI-led media buyer, what does that mean to you?
So, first, thanks, Sreekant, for having me. Sam, I think a lot of what you said, I think captures a lot of what this topic should say, right? So, each word was worth its weight in gold, I must say, right? No, but Sreekant, coming back to your question, look, I think today the AI-led media buyer, as we very commonly speak about, I think there is some confusion in our minds, right? In most people's lingo, it's easy to say anyone who uses AI tools is an AI-led buyer, right? For me, that's a slightly truncated version of what it could be rather than what it is. For me, an AI-led buyer is someone who designs the systems, who is able to create the architecture, to create the guardrails of how the system should run, rather than just run the tool itself. Yeah? Today, a lot of times, running a Performance Max or a Sky Builds or an Infiltrate becomes AI-led buying. And over there, I think we are almost cutting short the potential role that one can play as an ecosystem, and this is more for both marketers as well as agencies. Because the moment you lead yourself down the rabbit hole of saying the tool will do my job better, you're potentially leaving what the tool could do wrong on the table as well and not looking at it at all. Right? So I think it's good to get that confusion out of the way to say AI-led buyers are going to be the ones who are going to drive governance, who are going to create the guardrails, the systems, and how they should run rather than do the running itself.
Well, thank you very much. I think that's very well explained. So I'm sure a lot of people worry about this, and understandably so, that when it comes to AI, even in the broader sense, the way you've described it, as a very architecture, right? Uh, what is it that it could, which are the way, which are, what is the way, or which are the ways in which it could make the media buyer redundant or reduce his or her role?
So again, I think the easiest answer to that question is the reporting layer, right? But if I had to take a step back, I think two vectors to look at. What is the amount of time that a task takes, the complexity of the task itself, and what is the cost of the human to do that task, right? And if you then use this as the guideline, immediately, your reporting goes out because that's a voluminous data capture job. It's just about consolidating data from various sources, putting it together in formats which are then used for reviews, and most times it's put together as data and not as insights, right? So that layer goes out first. That part the machine does very, very well. The next is campaign trafficking, right? Because again, that's a highly labor-intensive job. Earlier, I remember we used to take anywhere between 10 days to 12 days to set up campaigns. After we planned and put them together. Today, if you look at it, machines can do it in a day, right? So that's the second part of it. The third part, which is the actual planning part, it gets compressed, but that's the part where one has to be a little careful, because if you let that go to the machine completely without any human guardrails, that's also the part where potentially the most nonsense comes in, right? Because the machine will hallucinate and it will give you plans which very confidently it will proclaim that this is the best for your business. And only when you run it, you'll realize that it's garbage in, garbage out. So planning, I think, is something that we will still have to hold together. And the last part is the human judgment, right? When it comes to negotiations, platform calibrations, right? That part I don't think is something that a machine can take over completely, because it cannot arbitrate across platforms as well. So these are the 4 layers I would look at.
Okay, so actually I've got some questions with regard to each of these things. So the next one was about the media plan. I mean, is the importance of in the age of AI, is the importance of the media plan greater, or are the inputs, are the inputs more important? I mean, I'm really not clear about this. What is the media plan in this age or going forward?
Sure. So look, I think every plan starts with an hypothesis, right? What is the business problem that you're trying to solve, and therefore, what is my brief supposed to be, right? If you get the hypothesis right, you'll be able to get your job to be done by the brand right, and you'll be able to write a sharp brief. In the absence of that, a machine can create a plan very, very quickly, like I said, right? I think the danger here is if you let the machine create the plan and just run without a very sharp guideline on the brief, you will quickly have a point where there will be zero friction. There will be a lot of action that will happen, a lot of money that will get burned, and at the end of it, you won't have anything to show on the business, right? Versus saying, if you look back, earlier it's not that our briefs were always sharp. We always had bad briefs and bad marketeers who gave bad briefs, right? But there was always this element of friction, where the plan making itself took a lot of time and a lot of conversations, where willy-nilly you caught some of this bad input before it actually went in. Now with AI coming in, if you take that friction out, you can go all over the place. So if you ask me, I think the plan making is going to get commoditized, but
the plan making
will get commoditized, right? Okay. The machine can do it very fast, and it will, right? There's no reason for it not to. But what will matter is, what do you guide the machine to create, right? What are the guardrails? What is your brief? What is the task that you're guiding it towards? And finally, once it creates the plan, is there a human in the loop? Are you even getting someone to look at whether the machine has actually delivered to your brief or not, right? If that doesn't happen, then yeah, we are going to lose some money.
So you started by saying that you start with a hypothesis, right? So give me an example of where the hypotheses, so let's say there are two of them, and if they're different, and what would it happen in an AI situation?
Oh, sure. So, look, I think if I had to take a step back and say, in cases there will be no hypothesis. There will just be, as Sam said, right? Someone could just say, my job is about creating awareness, right? And it doesn't matter how that awareness happens. The machine very happily will throw a high awareness or a high reach plan, which will presumptively lead to awareness at some point. The other way is that if you have a hypothesis that says that, look, I am a brand that's built for baby care. I want to go to mothers with babies of a young age, and therefore I want to find the right context, and then therefore build a plan that is structured around that, and then you get the machine to start pulling out a plan for that per se. That's a very different approach to it, right? So that's what I mean by
That's I
sharp
was just
hypothesis.
looking for an example. There's this thing, I think Sam also brought it up, but I mean, what is the point, and have we reached it where the media buyer has become a less of a buyer and more somebody who thinks of the algorithms involved and the business outcomes that they may lead to? Or is the media buyer still a media buyer in the traditional sense?
Yeah, so look, I think traditional sense is something that's changing, right? I don't think we can run away from that. However, I think earlier a media buyer was only responsible for delivering the plan specs, right? And that was it. Buy the plan and ensure that it delivers. To a point now where they are really not the ones who are executing the plan. For them, there is a machine that can do it far more efficiently. The question is, therefore, are they able to design systems which can hold the machine accountable without them running the execution by hand? And I don't think this is something that we have a lot of training in the industry for currently. It's still early days. But over time, I think as buyers, as planners also, we will have to learn how to orchestrate these systems better and hold them more accountable as we go in, right? There will be parts where the human intelligence will be a lot more important than the machine can ever give as an input, right? The insights, the cultural context, the brand guardrails. Are you getting enough sign-offs from other humans, other stakeholders, legal, R&D, etc.? These are things that will become increasingly more important. And that's the irony, right? So as we are getting more and more tech-driven, the human interface is becoming that much more important to ensure that the tech does not derail the primary deliverable, which is the business outcome.
Ankit, it reminds me of the way, when I look back on the way medicine has progressed. In the old days, doctors didn't have medicines which were very powerful. Reminds me a little of that. Now, medicines are incredibly powerful. You can fix the patient, so to say, pretty quickly. But if you get it wrong, I mean, heaven help you and the patient. It's a bit like that. So you said something about holding. So who is accounting? You talked about accountability. So things go wrong. Who is accountable for it? I mean, is it the marketer? Is it the agency? Is it the platform? Who's responsible?
So univocally the marketer, right? And look, accountability has to follow control. Okay. Finally, it's the marketer who signs off on what the guardrails are, the system design is, right? If they haven't, and if they've chosen to go with a black box where a publisher or an agency partner has come in and said, hey, it's magic, it'll happen, then they do that at their own peril, right? So eventually for me, the design is something that has to be under the control of the marketer, and therefore they have to be accountable for it. On the flip side of it, the execution that mandate does rest with the agency partner. It does rest with the publisher partner, and they should be held accountable for it, right? So there is accountability at both ends. It depends on what part of the spectrum we're talking about.
Earlier on, Ankit, you mentioned something about that the inability to measure across platforms, correct? Could you expound on that now?
Yeah,
I
no,
mean,
absolutely.
is the question of measurability across platforms exactly the same as it was before AI came along, or has the challenge changed in some way?
Yeah, so a bit of the same, a bit of the new. But look, I think the cross media and within that cross platform measurement problem continues to plague this industry. And I think that's something that all of us are keen to solve. Hopefully, we will at in due course. I don't think, however, we'll be able to solve the problem of incentives, right? Because finally, every publisher will have their own incentives that they are driving towards. And therefore, that's where the agency's role is very, very critical, right? Because they are the primarily arbitrator between the platform's incentive and the marketer's end goal, right? If you take that away, then essentially you are going to sway in the wind, right? So for me, that's really important, that's key.
To take what away? I didn't get that.
If you take the arbitration layer away, which is what agencies
Okay,
have traditionally done, and they should continue to do, because that's the primary differentiator that they bring in, right? Otherwise, you will go with every platform narrative that comes in, which is skewed towards driving their own yield at the end of it.
I have just a couple of more questions. It's so, this is, I think you already said that the negotiation part, no, it's okay, let me just frame this question up exactly the way it was. So could we reach a point where the advertiser has an AI agent talking directly to the Google's AI, okay, with the traditional media buying layer largely disappearing? I mean, could AI talk to AI and arrive at a deal?
So if I take the, AI is also a buzzword. I'll take that out of this question.
Sure, okay, fine.
But if you look at it, systems are already talking to each other, right? Today, for a large part of commoditized inventory, you do have RTP platforms that are transacting with each other, right? So you have machines from the publisher's end that are setting their floor price. There are machines from our end which are trying to find the right bid price. There is enough, guardrailing that happens that where we put in place, what is the range we want to operate with. So yeah, I think machines are already talking to each other. What is important is what are these ceilings, floor prices, etc. that we're talking about. And there, I don't think machines can ever replace the human element, because finally you need someone to drive the incentive for that particular stakeholder. Right? And that's the role of the human. If you leave it to machines, then how do incentives calibrate?
One interesting thing is that, especially for young people here, and I think, when we were young, lot of whatever you do in life, lot of the stuff, all young people want to be involved in strategy, as it were. I mean, that's something I've not seen change in the last 20, 30 years. But the reality is you learn from doing little things. Lots of little things which seem so pointless, but as you get senior and you lead teams, you realize all those little things add up to your understanding of what you do. And then you go to the big stuff, right? But if the mundane tasks are taken away by automation, okay, by the machines, where does the young media planner a buyer get the training from?
That's a good, scary question, Sreekant. So no, I don't think we've resolved it completely. But look, if I had to, I think again, I'm a firm believer that the human in the loop is a critical element of any AI system, right? Today, I think what we are almost signaling to the next generation of buyers and planners is that all that their role now stands at is to click on the approve button, right? Versus saying that AI will give you a range of alternatives that you have to work with. And again, this is more a governance mechanism that we need to arrive at eventually. To say that AI is not the one source of truth. It is a place where it can give you statistical probabilities. And for those probabilities, there's always a range of options that you can deploy. Now, for the youngster, it is therefore about thinking within those range of possibilities and then selecting and putting their neck out, sticking their neck out and saying, hey, I think this is the right one, bases my understanding of the brand, category, consumer, etc. Right? So, in a way, I think their role is going to start at a slightly evolved level to where we were, where they might not need to do the grunt work. What they will need to develop, however, is a sense of being able to see through some of the hallucination that systems are sure to continue to throw at them. Yeah.
Okay, very good, very well said. And what is the impact of what it is doing to the distance between creative and media? Because you've seen this over a very long period of time, about how creative was about the big idea. I mean, the big idea still exists, but increasingly, I think because of frequency and reach, you can do lots of little interventions and raise awareness, right? How do you see the role? What do you see as the role of the big idea when it comes in the context of the way media planning and buying is changing?
No, yeah, I think the good old days where you used to have a huge media event around a campaign, right? Look, I think if you ask me, maybe the big idea as a media event might lose its relevance slightly because, again, referencing what Sam said, earlier it was easier to get consumer attention if you had a tentpole media input going in. I think those days are behind us given the fragmentation on media and consumer attention, right? However, I think there is a very clear role for the big idea still that exists and that will continue to exist, which is to hold the brand's communication together. Because if you don't have that big idea holding it together, you will have a fragmented 1,000 creators going out and the consumer is never going to attribute the scale of what you're trying to do back to the brand and the task that you're trying to achieve.
And a last question. If you had to talk to a 25-year-old media planner, how you have to talk to them about what they would need to do to remain relevant as they went ahead in their career, what would you advise them?
So one, understand your consumer well. I think that's the starting point. What does the brand need to do? Understand the business well, right? The third is from a media point of view, and increasingly because you will interact with machines, develop your tech skills. And when I say tech skills, it's not about running a dashboard. It's about the statistical and econometric modeling that one should learn as a student, right? Because only if you have that, will you be able to put your best foot forward and somewhere have the gumption to say, hey, model, I don't think this recommendation is right, I'm going to override. And that ability to override is going to actually now differentiate, best-in-class planners versus, the mediocre ones who click on approve.
Standing up to the AI solution, basically, yeah?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Ankit. That was really fabulous. Could you have a round of applause, please, for Ankit?
Thank you so much, Ankit, for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure. Mr. Khandekar, I request you to please felicitate our guest. Round of applause, everyone, for Mr. Ankit Desai.